Happy Mother's Day, everyone. What's going on? Good Mike Work Commentaries back at you with a very long overdue WWE Classic pay-per-view review. It feels like forever since we've done one of these on the channel, and I thought it would be fun in honor of Mother's Day to come up here and talk about the very first ever WWF In Your House pay-per-view, which aired 28 years ago today, way back on May 14th, 1995, about 3 weeks before yours truly graduated high school, on a day that also landed on Mother's Day. So if we're going to resurrect these pay-per-view reviews, I can't think of a better show to do than this one, can you? So this should be pretty fun to review, and I'm looking forward to it. There is actually a reason behind getting this In Your House doubleheader today, and that is today is Mother's Day, and I'm going to be super busy at the restaurant, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be home in time to hang out with you guys this evening and do our normal classic WWE pay-per-view watch-alongs that we do every week. So I thought I would compromise instead by dropping this review in the morning and then bumping up the start time of tonight's watch-along 1 hour later. So it will be 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And instead of watching a 3-hour WWE pay-per-view, we're going to watch a 2-hour one, and we're going to watch the sequel to this In Your House. So later on this evening, together, all of us, we're going to watch In Your House number 2, which will have the rematch of the main event of this show of Diesel and Sid in a lumberjack match. Also, Shawn Michaels challenging Jeff Jarrett for the Intercontinental title, and that wonderful performance of With My Baby Tonight. So we are going to be checking that out later on tonight. Hopefully you can join us for that, and hopefully you enjoy this review. And man, I got to tell you, 1995 was a really strange time in the company. WWE was starting to feel the heat from WCW. A lot of the 80s WWE wrestlers had jumped ship to Atlanta. Hogan and Savage were already there, along with a slew of other names from WWE's past, and they were just a few months away from kicking off WCW Nitro that would start in September, that would go live and would really put the pressure on WWE leading into 1996, where they lost Hall and Nash, and then that started the NWO. So WWE already here in 1995, I felt like we're on the ropes with WCW starting to compete, starting to make some waves, and starting, frankly, to have a few more recognizable names on their show than WWE had on theirs. And it was a really, really weird time for somebody who was a big-time WWE mark. I was a fangirl to the highest degree, and I carried the WWE flag. And Bret Hart was my favorite wrestler. This was a very frustrating year for me as a fan. Not only did I feel like WWE wasn't doing well with a terrible WrestleMania 11 and just not a lot going on that was exciting me. And plus, it really felt like Bret Hart was taking a back seat to Diesel by working feuds with Lawler and Jean-Pierre Lafitte and all these other guys. And it was just a frustrating time to be an 18-year-old high school senior. You know what I mean? So I have a lot of memories of this, and I thought it would be fun to come up here and share with you guys what I remember about this time period. And I remember WWE was getting so corny and so cheesy. We'll talk about that later with Todd Pettengill and Stephanie Wyand running all over the place on this In Your House broadcast, giving away this damn house. And it was tough to be, a young man, about to venture into adulthood, full of P&V and just a couple of months from losing his virginity, having to watch this silly, corny, cheesy nonsense. I had to be a closet wrestling fan because this shit was just too fucking stupid. And it was rough watching it, but at the end of the day, I was always a professional wrestling fan. When you sifted through all the BS, there were really good, talented wrestlers in WWE, like Bret, like Shawn, like a lot of guys there. And if you can kind of tune everything else out, wrestling still could be very, very fun, even in 1995. And these In Your House events, from what I remember, basically, I think it was just WWE's answer to WCW upping their pay-per-views every month, where WWE and WCW just had a few per year, and then they would slowly increase them until we got to one a month, and that's what this In Your House ushered in. Up until this point, WWE only ran, 4 shows? 5? It was Rumble, WrestleMania, King of the Ring, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. That's all WWE was doing, was 5 events. But then once WCW kicked things into gear, WWE created these In Your House in-between events that would be cheaper and shorter. And I really, looking back, liked this format. I was really confused about it at the time because it was such a bizarre pay-per-view name. In Your House, I mean, look at the graphics here. Looking back, it's all very nostalgic. That's why I have it front and center here on the overlay, because I do love the way this looked and I have fond memories of it. But really, at the time, I was like, God, what is this childish, corny looking Sesame Street shit? That's what was going on in my head. I was a little bit sketched out by how silly the product was getting. I mean, every Saturday morning, it was Todd Pettengill and Stephanie acting like idiots on WWF Mania from the studios there, where they were just dressed like crazy. It felt like there was a bunch of 5-year-olds watching it. It was hard for someone like me of my age to really, really get invested in it, but I was. Somehow I was able to do it anyway, and I still prefer WWE's programming, content, matches, and pay-per-views head and shoulders above WCW's. So this was going to be an interesting idea because these pay-per-views originally were only $14.99 or $14.95. They made a big deal about them, but they're only going to be half the price. And these were 2-hour shows instead of 3-hour shows. Or back then, WWE's pay-per-views generally ran about 2 hours, 45 minutes. These would be about 1 hour, 45 minutes. That's all the time they really had from these cable companies. It was tough to get it. And looking back, I feel like this was better because it gave the big 5 pay-per-views still center stage, and it still made those a very big deal while having the in-between pay-per-views just have one name. I didn't necessarily hate this throughout 1995 and 1996. I liked the shorter, cheaper pay-per-views in between because when you do, a 3-hour pay-per-view every single month and you got 2 companies doing that at the same time, it was too much. But here we hadn't ventured into the too much zone yet, but we were about to get there because now, even with these shorter pay-per-views, it still puts a pay-per-view every single month on the calendar. And I felt like that might be overkill. Now, I think the $14.95 thing lasted until the end of the year, and then I know it increased to $19.95, at least in 1996. I'm not sure how many months they went with the $14.95 price, but they did bump it up $5 a little bit later, which still was reasonable. I did not mind a $20 price tag for these shows at the time, although I did not order this one on pay-per-view. I actually watched it. I remember I watched it scrambled. We've all done that back in the day, those who might be my age, watching a pay-per-view on the cable box on the channel where you haven't purchased it, and all you can do is listen to it and watch the scrambled feed. But it worked. It was like watching it or listening to it on the radio, and I did that for several pay-per-views back in the day, and I wasn't sure if I really wanted to slap my $15 down for this at the time. I was very distracted, on the verge of graduation. I knew about this show, but it really wasn't heavily on my radar, and I remember being home in my room that night, and it was a lot harder to order pay-per-views back in the day. Even if I wanted to order this, I probably would have had to do it a couple of days before, like on Friday, call the cable company, put the order in. I lived in rural North Carolina where they didn't have the most high-tech shit. So I would have had to go the long way. It's not like I could have just decided 1 minute before the show to order it like you can now. So I do remember being home that night in my room and watching the scrambled feed on my TV and listening to some of the shit that was going on, and it was pretty entertaining. Now, I didn't order the next one either, which we'll talk about tonight. I think it took me until the third In Your House to actually purchase one, and then I bought, I think, the next 3 or 4 in a row after that. But the In Your House idea was interesting. I was curious about it, interested to see how it was going to work. But all in all, the pro wrestling landscape was entering into a brand new era here of pay-per-views every month. And I know to the modern fan and the casual fan, that doesn't sound too crazy, but back then it was really weird to envision these things happening every month. And then starting in 1997 with In Your House Ground Zero, they would make the move to 3 hours. So this would last about 2 years and a couple of months, and then they would move every pay-per-view to 3 hours, and then that would continue on until, to where we are now. Sometimes we even get more than one pay-per-view a month with these Saudi shows and everything else. So way back in 1995, 28 years ago, this was the day that kickstarted basically the industry that we know today. So I felt like this is a pretty big day in history. I could have waited 2 more years and done this on the 30th anniversary, but since today was also Mother's Day and it also happens to be the anniversary of In Your House, come on, we got to do an In Your House review, right? This pay-per-view emanated from Syracuse, New York on May 14th, 1995, and they did do one of those countdown shows. Now, this was before it was called the Free-for-All, but they would air it on a lot of the preview guide channels or whatever channel you might order pay-per-view on at the time, that's generally where these aired. Sometimes they would air in two places, on the pay-per-view channel and on the TV guide scroll, like the one I use for my watch-alongs and the one you'll see later tonight. Sometimes it would play there, and I don't think they were calling it the free-for-all quite yet. I don't think that came until the next year, but they still did a lot on the show. There was a lot of dark matches prior to the show and after. Owen Hart worked twice, Bret worked twice, Bulldog worked, Undertaker worked. There was a lot of guys not on the main card that were featured elsewhere in the show. And a lot of times during the countdown show, there would be a match going on in the ring. You could hear it while the commentators were talking, but they were too busy showing the video packages, talking about the featured matches of the night, and of course, Todd Pettengill running around like a damn maniac around this house set, putting over this big house giveaway. That was a big part of the promotion for this brand new In Your House event, is that WWE was going to give away a house. And back then they were trying to think of anything to just give them some buzz or notoriety or something. They were so desperate for the attention. They were thirsting for it. Nowadays, everybody wants a piece of WWE. They're featured everywhere on every channel. Super Bowl champions are holding up their title belts. It was not like that in 1995. Any attention that they could get, they leapt on. So maybe this was a publicity stunt to give away this house. It was very weird to give away a house to just some fan around the world. And as we will see later, the person who won this did not live anywhere near Florida. So you wonder what they're going to do with it. Either move to Florida or sell it. Like, what the fuck is the point of even giving away a house to begin with? But you never knew what was going on inside of the noodle of Vince McMahon, especially back in the 90s. An interesting note, too, about this countdown show, this is where that infamous Sid, "We're live, pal" botch happened with Jim Ross. Sid was cutting his promo, being interviewed by JR, and he says, let's do this again. And JR goes, "We're live, pal." So that's where this took place. I had completely forgotten about that. But now we're on to the main show. It's time for WWF In Your House #1. We had a very dramatic Todd Pettengill intro video package running down the card. Tonight, the Hitman, Bret Hart. That type of thing. You saw that all the time during WWE's pay-per-view days back in the mid-90s. And Pettengill is a legend. I love Pettengill. I know I kind of mocked him earlier, and he used to drive me a little crazy in the 90s because I was embarrassed, to be honest with you. When I was a junior and senior in high school, it was really tough to want anybody to know that I was a wrestling fan. The only ones that knew were my close, tight friends that had been to my house and know I watched this shit all the time. But in turn, it's not something you're bringing up to girls in 1994 if you're in high school, if you're Greg Morgan. So it's not something that I was really advertising. And the cheesiness and the nerdiness of Todd was really hard for me to stomach as a kid, but I still oddly liked him. Does that make any sense? I don't know how to describe that phenomenon. And now as an adult, I look back at Todd Pettengill with so much joy and happiness and fondness and nostalgia of how much I loved the dude. And he was rocking an exquisite mullet for this show, by the way. Shout out to Todd's 1995 mullet. So he wraps up his video package. We get the pyro intro. We see the In Your House set that would remain for a couple of years with the garage and the front door, and all that looked very cool. Vince McMahon and Doc Hendricks are on the call. Now, Doc Hendricks just made his debut in the company, I think the month before. So bringing in Michael Hayes was a shock for me to see. I remember hearing on the hotlines at the time that they were bringing him in, but I had no idea what he was going to do. And then boom, he turns up one day on that Action Zone or whatever with Todd Pettengill, which I also liked the two of them together. They were dorky, weird, odd. It was so cheesy, but I fucking loved it. I don't know why. I loved the Action Zone. You fans my age, didn't you love the Action Zone? They had different renditions of the Action Zone. Sometimes it was live matches with JR on commentary, but the version where it was Todd and Doc in the studio and they each had a podium and they would run through the week's crap, that's what I liked. That's the version of Action Zone that I liked the most. So I did like Doc Hendricks, even though I thought it was absurd that they were changing his name. And it was one of those things that a fan my age used to get very annoyed at, and fans this age do the same thing now. I did not like it when they would change up people's gimmicks and stuff because Vince was notorious for that. He would always bring somebody in and change their name. I'm like, dude, we know who this is. And it was absurd. And sometimes it worked out. Guys like Mark Calloway turning into The Undertaker, that was a great move. But sometimes you didn't need to do this. And you could have just brought Michael Hayes in as Michael Hayes, making him Doc Hendricks. What? But he's there, and he's got his voice, and he was pretty entertaining on commentary. And he worked, and he had pretty good, I think, early chemistry with Vince. They weren't perfect. I could tell that Vince was annoyed with him from time to time. But overall, I thought he was a decent addition for 1995 WWE. The first match of the night is my boy, Bret the Hitman Hart, taking on Hakushi. Now, Bret Hart is going to be working 2 matches tonight. He's in the middle of a feud with Jerry Lawler, who has come back to haunt Bret Hart 2 years after showing up and attacking him at King of the Ring 1993, and they went through their 93 feud. Lawler is back at it again, going after the Hart family and the Harts and all of that. He was very insulting towards Bret Hart's mother. So Bret Hart already had this match planned with Hakushi at In Your House. This was set up. I think this might have been when Lawler, I think, was spreading the lies about Bret being a racist or whatever. And Bret was being presented an award on TV, I think on Superstars from the Japanese media. And Hakushi attacked Bret during that. And I think that's what set up this match. But Bret also had the issue with Jerry Lawler as well. And I remember on Raw, Bret coming out and confronting Lawler on commentary and saying he's going to face him at In Your House after he faces Hakushi. So double duty tonight for Bret Hart. And this first match would be so great. In terms of In Your House matches, this is up there at the top easily. Bret Hart and Hakushi. First look at Hakushi. He had not been in the company for very long, and a lot of the moves that he was doing in this match were very innovative for the time. I cannot stress that enough. You know, now seeing Hurricanranas and moonsaults and springboards and shit like that, it's nothing. But in 1995, this style was not everywhere, and Hakushi brought a whole different set of moves and style that American fans of WWE were not going to be that familiar with. And he was so exciting. I think that's why Bret jumped on him right away. If you notice, Bret did not waste any time working with Hakushi because Bret was a great worker, and he was probably always on the lookout with people who could work, you know, so he didn't have to be in there with Adam fucking Bomb every night. So Bret jumped right on that opportunity working with Hakushi, and the two of them had a great match. Now, Bret does a pre-match interview with Todd Pettengill. He dedicates this match to his mother and says that she's watching and he's going to make her proud. Like I said, the match was fantastic. Hakushi showing us a style and some moves that a lot of fans of that time period weren't familiar with here in the States. He was super exciting, and he brought a lot to 1995 WWE, and his match with Bret was really fun. Now, Vince McMahon of the WWE, it's so funny watching tape from back in these days when WWE tries so hard, specifically Vince, just to get people's names and nicknames and personas and characters over. They must have called Hakushi the modern day kamikaze, which I know that's his nickname, but they probably repeated that 50 times in this match. And that's the way Vince was. Whenever Vince would call like a Bret Hart match, everything that Bret did, the Hitman Bret Hart, the Hitman Bret Hart kicks out, the Hitman Bret Hart with an elbow. It's like, he can't just say Bret or Hart. It's always got to be the full name, because Vince is a psycho. We got a lot of good spots here too in this match. Hakushi sold an amazing clothesline from Bret, big 360 right in the middle of one of those Bret flurries. You know, normally it's the Russian leg sweep, the back breaker, the second rope elbow. To see it get interrupted by something else and Bret just throwing a crazy lariat that turns Hakushi inside out was really fun to see. There's that classic spot with the springboard, second rope springboard moonsault onto the floor that takes Bret and Hakushi into the guardrail. That spot's been replayed a lot. And at the end of the day, it was a pretty simple finish. Bret countered a German suplex into a victory roll. So normally you're on the wrestler's shoulders and you can roll into one, but Bret was in German position and he just somersaulted forward and was able to catch Hakushi's leg in a victory roll position, or his legs, and get the pin and win the match. So he squeaks out a victory here, a hard-fought victory. Bret Hart, former WWE champion, already a legend in the company, And this newcomer gives him a run for his money. I thought it was a great endorsement of Hakushi for Bret to work with him and give him that type of match. It reminds me of Bret working with Stone Cold Steve Austin the next year. Same thing. Austin came in. Bret recognized him right away. Bret's got a nose for talent. He knows. And he goes, I want to work with that guy. And that was the first thing Bret did when he came back. So Bret kind of had a history of doing this, and it was a really fun early Hakushi match and a fond in your house memory. Now, after this match, Bret Hart leaves the ring, and as he's getting out of the ring, he twists his knee. He goes down. Oh, he hurts his knee. Oh, God. Oh. And the announcers acknowledge it and notice that Bret Hart is hurt as well. Jerry the King Lawler also knows Bret Hart is hurt because he, I guess, was watching behind the scenes. And then we cut backstage to the WWF Superstar line. So Todd is a super busy dude. He's now back here at the WWF Superstar line that's being manned by Stan Lane and Alundra Blaze. What a duo. And Todd is back there talking to them, and Jerry Lawler shows up, and he wants to do his match now. Come on, get Bret Hart out there. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. His match is over, so let's do it. Let's do it now. Lawler saw that Bret Hart got hurt, so he wants to capitalize on that and get this match done right away. But Todd says that's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, Bret Hart is on his way back here right now, at which time Lawler gets a very convenient beep on his beeper from his mama. Mama Lawler beeping him. I'm proud to say I never had a beeper. I never had one. I never needed one. I didn't get them. I mean, all they were was a thing that gave you a number to call back. You're just going to have to catch me at home, man. That's all I'm going to say. I would never wear one of them things on my belt, but they were everywhere. So Lawler gets beeped by his mom conveniently so he can scurry his little bitch ass away and get away from Bret the Hitman Hart. Up next is a handicap match that was originally a tag. It was going to be Double J, Jeff Jarrett, and the Roadie competing in his first WWE match as the Roadie, taking on Razor Ramon and the 1-2-3 Kid. The 1-2-3 Kid got injured and had to be bumped from the match, and he was home. He called in during the match or during the entrances when the combatants were making their way to the ring. They phoned him up at the commentary table, and Vince has a nice little on-the-phone discussion with the 1-2-3 Kid. Not too much to say, a little bit awkward. It's kind of hard when you're, technology, especially back in those days, and having to pipe somebody through, and then Vince is, trying to talk to him, and Kid doesn't have a whole lot to say other than, he says something like, I might not be there, but, and then I think he realizes he has nowhere to go. I'm like, well, if you're not going to be there, there's nothing you can do about anything that takes place in the ring. And he goes, I might not be there, but I'm still going to be cheering for Razor. And Vince, I just want to say one thing. When I get healthy, I'm coming for the Roadie. I'm like, well, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. So really not much said on the phone call there. Those are always awkward. Doc Hendricks has a little flub up here too. He says this is the first handicap match on a WWE pay-per-view. The hell it is. Dude, there's been at least two. WrestleMania 5, we had the Powers of Pain and Fuji taking on Demolition. And at SummerSlam 91, the infamous final match of the Ultimate Warrior until WrestleMania 8, when he ran off, that was a three-way. That was that was a 3-on-2. That was Hogan and Warrior taking on the Triangle of Terror, as Vince says, with his Northeast New England accent. This match was a little on the boring side, to be honest, and as a fan, I was much more concerned and interested in Razor Ramon winning back the Intercontinental Championship, and he had that title match at WrestleMania 11, and that whole thing ended in a DQ, I believe, and now this was a tag, and I just wanted Razor to get the belt back because I didn't like Jeff Jarrett in 1995. I love him in 2023, especially when he is on the Briscoe family chicken farm, but back in 1995, not my favorite dude. And I liked Razor Ramon as Intercontinental Champion much more than Jeff Jarrett. But Jeff Jarrett, after he won that Intercontinental title, he was pretty much shit on. I think he did. I don't know if he won or lost via DQ at WrestleMania 11, but I know he got his ass kicked pretty good. And then here he'd lose again. And then at the Following in Your House, the one that we're going to watch tonight, it's not a good night for him against Shawn Michaels. And here it was no different, despite the 2-on-1 advantage that Razor fell victim to many times during the match. He was able to fight off and fend off the odds here and hit Jeff Jarrett with a razor's edge. I would have pinned Roadie in this situation. Hit Jeff Jarrett with a razor's edge and got the win and won the handicap match, but he was then immediately attacked, and the heels continued the attack after the match until Savio Vega makes his WWE debut, And this was one of the parts of the show that I remember listening to in the scramble. Oh, I should mention, I also remember hearing the part where they said Bret's knee was hurt. And I swear to you, I'm not lying, even through the scramble, I knew that he was faking it. I just knew. I was like, that's what Bret would do. So even without being able to see it, I could sniff that out. But here, I couldn't do the same thing with Savio Vega. I was dying to know who this person was. Savio hits the ring. He makes the save. Savio was formerly Quang under the mask in WWE. He had the mist and everything. And now he's coming out as his regular name, Savio Vega, as a Puerto Rican wrestler to save Razor Ramon from the beatdown. But I didn't know who this guy was, and the announcers just kept saying, who is this guy? Who is this guy that came in from the crowd? So I was hoping that it was someone I recognized. I was hoping that whoever this person was somebody from WCW. And I wouldn't know until a couple of segments later when they said his name that he probably wasn't anybody that I was familiar with, or this was no defection. But I was holding out hope there at first that maybe WWE grabbed somebody from Atlanta. After that, we got a Sid video package just highlighting his psycho-ness. Now, you got to remember, Sid has not been in the ring in WWE since 1992 when he left. So he returned as Shawn Michaels' bodyguard. He might have been working some live events by this point. I don't know, but I don't think he had a TV match when he came back as Shawn's bodyguard, because then they did the WrestleMania 11 thing, and then he attacked Shawn the night after. Shawn is on the shelf right now, I believe. He's about to turn babyface, pretty much already is, and he's on the shelf nursing the attack from that night, and now Diesel's going to face Sid, and Sid has not been in the ring since he was pretty damn dominant back in 1992. And even though Sid was a heel here and Diesel was on top of WWE, it was weird that he didn't feel as strong as he did in 92. He was a scary dude 3 years before. I always thought Sid had one of the best looks the professional wrestling business has ever seen. His physique, his size, his height, his power. He wasn't great in the ring, but neither was Kevin Nash. Neither one of those guys are really Undertaker, but I think Nash was a hair better in the ring than Sid. Sid, came off very stiff in there, but he had such a good look, and a lot about his presentation was so phenomenal that it really didn't matter. He could still do some pretty crazy shit in there. He had a great power bomb, and Sid was the man. So to me, this was interesting as a fan to see him getting back in the ring in WWE in 1995 after all of those years gone from the company during a time when WWE desperately needed some top heels and some recognizable faces. So I thought that they did Sid kind of wrong in 95. I mean, he was made to look like kind of a bitch throughout this whole feud. But when he came in, I was like, oh my God, they have Sid back. This is going to be great. And it was kind of the opposite. After that, we went to a Barry Dudinsky merchandise promo spot. He's in the crowd. They did this during 1995. They had this dude showing up on pay-per-views and Raws peddling some merch. This time, it's a sweet-ass Bret the Hitman Hart shirt. $20, 1-800-TITAN-91. Call up and you can place your order right there. Kids, get your parents' permission before calling. After that, it is a King of the Ring qualifier. Incidentally, I think on the dark matches on the post show, there was a British Bulldog Owen Hart King of the Ring qualifying match that went to a draw. Neither man qualified there. This was a lot shorter of a match. Mabel versus Adam Bomb. The whole point of this match, it felt like, was to get Mabel moving because he was about to win the King of the Ring, get a title shot at SummerSlam. So it was time to get him over. Now, right after the entrances, right before the match starts, Mo provokes Adam Bomb, who goes after him, and then Mabel attacks Adam Bomb before the bell and works him over. So when the bell rang, it only took about a minute or so for Mabel to put Adam Bomb down. Terrible match here. I mean, just God, terrible. But Adam Bomb goes for a high cross body onto Mabel. Mabel catches him, falls straight down, plants him for the win, and that was that. At least it was short. Short, painless, no big deal. Mabel was on the way to win the King of the Ring. We're back at the Superstar line again, and this is when we get the introduction of Savio Vega, the guy that helped Razor Ramon earlier on. Now, as I was watching this on the Scrambled TV, I was dying to know who this guy was, and when I was hearing them talk about this guy named Savio Vega, and you heard him talk, I didn't recognize his voice. Even Razor looks at Savio and said, "Oh man, I didn't recognize you at first. You changed a little," and touched his face, maybe acknowledging the mask. And then Savio cuts a promo, and I kind of wish he didn't. It was a little Lucha Things vibey. It just came off weird. Even the Scott Hall, I'll put the screenshot up here, just has this look on his face like, God, this is brutal. And Savio just, he wasn't really cutting promos in his previous gimmick as Quang. So this is his first time with a microphone, and his words just didn't come out that well. But we just saw him on WWE pay-per-view just a week ago. Savio is the man. I met Savio backstage in WWE about a year after this, and the dude is awesome. And this was his debut. Welcome to WWE, Savio Vega, but a member of the Clique he was not. He was BSK. After that, we have a WrestleMania 11 rematch, Smoking Guns trying to win back their tag team championships that they lost to Owen and mystery partner Yokozuna a month earlier at WrestleMania. This match wasn't much. Yoko was getting into the stage of his career where he was extremely limited. He could not do a whole lot. Although he did hit a leg drop to Bart Gunn on the floor, which was enough to win the match as Yoko threw Bart Gunn in, and Owen simply just pins Bart for the win, and Owen and Yoko retain their tag team titles. We cut backstage to an interview with Big Daddy Cool Diesel and the Toddster, talking about his main event championship match against Sid later on, and Diesel reveals that this is his first Mother's Day after losing his mother, and his mother did in real life pass away at the end of 1994, right around the holidays. He's spoken about this in podcasts and interviews throughout the years. So this is pretty well known. And he kind of killed our mood here mentioning this to all of us, but that's very sad. There's a lot of people watching today who have also lost their mothers, and my heart goes out to all of you who are motherless on Mother's Day. I know what that's like from a father's standpoint. My mother is still with me, and just again, happy Mother's Day to all the moms, and happy Mother's Day to all the moms that are no longer with us. But Diesel mentions that his mom passed away. And so there's a lot on his mind. And then Todd kind of really awkwardly, if you thought the Savio Vega promo earlier was awkward, this was weirder. Todd tries to ask Diesel in a very serious manner about Shawn Michaels after Diesel kind of just darkened the mood a little, and Todd's just delivery is fucking off. And Diesel kind of snaps out of it and fires up at the end and tells Sid that he's got no chance and Big Daddy's going to be drinking tonight or whatever he said back in the day. Weird interview, very weird interview. Next up is the Bret the Hitman Hart and Jerry Lawler match. Bret pulling double duty, already victorious earlier on against Hakushi. And as he was leaving the ring, he tweaked his knee, which Lawler noticed. And Lawler, throughout the show, since that moment, has been trying to get the match in the ring as quickly as possible. Finally, it's time for the match, and Jerry Lawler is in the ring with a very beautiful young woman who he is claiming is his mother. And again, I could not see this on the scramble, but when I would see the footage of this on the next TV, because I think on Raw or whatever, they would show some stills. They would never show footage of the pay-per-views, but they would show stills. And they showed her, and I instantly recognized her. She was, I don't know her name, but she was a fitness model on one of those revolving ESPN fitness shows that would air like every morning. I know this because when I would get up and get ready for school, I would always turn on ESPN. And this isn't back in the day TV how it is now. This is, I had 31 channels or whatever it was. And I would just get up and instinctively turn it on ESPN while I got ready for school, while I took a shower, while I brushed my teeth, while I ate breakfast. And these fitness shows would be on in the morning. And it was always like super hot chicks. There was like Body by Jake, there were some men ones too. And, but mostly everybody doing this were like super hot people, men and women. And I remember that. And I recognized her from one of those shows instantly. And even Vince McMahon goes, that can't be her mother. Vince, 1995 Vince, you just want to choke him. Jerry Lawler's mother goes on to tell Lawler that she will be so proud of him if he can beat Bret the Hitman Hart. And then after he beats Bret Hart, she wants to face Helen. So Bret's mother, Helen, is going to have to take on Jerry Lawler's mother. And let me tell you, from what I could see of this girl on those fitness shows, Helen would whoop her ass. Whoop her ass. It would just be Helen on top of her, just raining blows, countlessly on her head, stretching her, choking her. This woman wouldn't stand a chance against Helen Hart at all. I'd love to see the match. Bring it on. Bring it on, sister. Helen's going to take you down to Chinatown. But once we get the match going, oh, by the way, after that, Lawler calls Helen Hart a pile of wrinkled flesh. Just thought I should let you guys know that that's what Lawler said. And in what might be my favorite part of the whole pay-per-view, Vince then sends it backstage to Todd Pettengill to interview Bret Hart, but Vince calls it the gorilla position. He goes, standing by, Bret Hart is at the gorilla position with Todd Pettengill. And I was like, I don't recall gorilla position being tossed around as a term in 1995 on TV, no less. I feel like that was a Freudian slip. I feel like Vince just said gorilla position and didn't mean to say it to the live audience, because as someone who watched a ton of WWE programming in the 80s and 90s, I do remember kayfabe being said one time on TV. Bruno Sammartino and Vince were joking about kayfabe one time on TV. But I don't recall gorilla position being mentioned too many times. And this was many years before Gorilla Monsoon even passed away. So very interesting to hear Vince in 1995 call it the gorilla position. If there are other times he said this, or somebody in WWE has said it during those years, maybe, but not that I can recall. So that was kind of cool. And Bret, as he's talking to Todd Pettengill, reveals what we kind of already suspected, and that is his knee is completely fine. He faked it. He wasn't hurt at all. He's dancing around on his leg. And then he says, Lawler, your history. And Todd is laughing his ass off. Bret then hits the ring, and as he's making his entrance, he starts hopping around on his leg. And Lawler plays the role perfectly. Like, the look on Lawler's face when he sees that Bret isn't hurt looks like genuine surprise and genuine, oh shit, what do I do now? And he just immediately ran away from Bret, who caught up with him and just started beating the hell out of Jerry Lawler. It was a little bit more of a competitive match than I would have liked it to be, but Bret Hart did work earlier on. Hakushi eventually comes out to interfere. They send Shinja out first to distract the referee. The referee actually falls through the ropes and gets his foot tangled in the ropes, and he's basically upside down hanging off the apron, while Bret is taking care of Lawler in the ring, who has been surviving quite the flurry of anger from Bret all match long. Hakushi shows up, he gets on the top rope, dives, and nails Bret on the back, and winds up nailing Bret with multiple top rope headbutts as the referee is all incapacitated. And when the referee is untangled and put back in the ring, Lawler is able to roll up Bret and just fold him right up and get a 1, 2, 3. And listening to this on my scrambled TV, I was pissed. I was just sick and tired of what they were doing to Bret. You know, and in my mind, why was this guy not champion? I liked Diesel, but I half-ass resented him too, because I'm like, Bret is better than all you motherfuckers and he should be champion, and he's losing to Lawler on Mother's Day. And oh my God, I was such a mark. But I was not happy about Bret losing, because I just felt like it pushed him further down. And that was upsetting to me and confusing at the same time. And I just did not understand why he was not more on top of the card. In hindsight, I understand it now, because they were going to go with Diesel, a babyface champion, and not everybody can be champion at the same time. And that's a problem that a lot of modern fans have today, is they don't understand that either, just like I used to not understand it. So not everybody can be champion. When there's already somebody on top, you got to give something for the contender who's not really going to be in the title picture right now to do. So give him feuds and give him whatever. And that's what they were doing here with Jerry Lawler and Bob Backlund, and then Jean-Pierre Lafitte. And then finally at the end of the year, they couldn't ignore Bret anymore, and they stuck him in a title match with Diesel, and he won the belt back. So I would get my way. It's just at the time I didn't see it, here in May. It would take until November, when Bret would actually win the title, for me to be fully happy. After that, we get a really disturbing, creepy, whispering promo by Sid, close up of his face. I mean, you are right in his chin. You're inside of him. And he's whispering, and this, I'm sure, was pre-taped after the botch that happened on the pre-show. And he was just saying his master and ruler of the world stuff, and it was creeping me out, and I wanted it to end as quickly as possible. And then it's time to give away this damn house. Finally, after weeks and weeks of promoting this, just hearing them in WWE's 1995 way promote this type of stuff and these campaigns was just super nauseating. And I was so happy that this damn house was finally going to be out of our lives. So all show long. They've been cut into the big bin of letters that were sent in and envelopes. That's what you had to do. Just write a letter, send it in. They'd pick it out, and they would call you on the air and give away the letter. So they go get a couple of rakes out of the garage. Todd and Stephanie are both completely out of their minds. I didn't know what to make of Stephanie Wyand back in the day. I liked her okay. She had a lot of energy. She was certainly spunky, but I did not know what she brought from a wrestling standpoint. Earlier on, when I was complaining about the product at the time to a high school senior like myself, feeling very childish. Granted, children have always been a large portion of WWE's core audience. It was almost just a little too corny, cheesy, too Sesame Street looking for me. And it was to the point where I couldn't even tell anybody I was a wrestling fan in high school other than my close friends. And she seemed like she was a kindergarten teacher, didn't she? She dressed like one. She had the energy of one. She just seemed like a kindergarten teacher. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with my life. I mean, she seemed nice enough, seemed like a sweetheart. I've never heard any bad stories about her. She certainly didn't seem like a mean person at all. She seemed almost too cheerful, too joyous. And she was just maybe a little bit too much or the wrong kind of energy for me. Maybe that makes some sense. So I didn't dislike Stephanie Wyand, but I wasn't sure the point of this hire. I'd rather just have Gorilla Monsoon. I'd rather have Gorilla Monsoon, Todd Pettengill in the studio for WWF Mania than her. But they were trying to attract that Saturday morning at 10 a.m. audience, which I believe is when Mania aired. And you needed somebody bubbly and cheerful and Nickelodeon-ish looking to be on there. And I think that's what she was brought in for. But she didn't last too long, and she was gone for whatever reason, probably a little bit less than a year than coming in. So no harm done, but she was an interesting kind of announcer or interviewer that passed through there, or personality that just kind of passed through for a minute, kind of like Joe Fowler. Stan Lane was in there for a minute and a half doing the same type of stuff. So Stephanie Wyand, wherever you are today, I hope you're doing well. And I still remember you. You were a big part of my senior year in high school. Crazy enough. Anyway, back to the big house giveaway. They're raking and combing through this big bin of letters. They finally pull one out. Todd screws up the phone call the first time. They have to try it again. And watching Vince panic laugh is hilarious because Todd screws up the phone number and you can hear Vince going, ha, 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 in his loud ass laugh that just sounds like he's panicking internally, but trying to put forth a brave face. So finally, luckily, on the second call, Todd gets it right. They answer. It's a kid named Matt Pompizelli who lives in Nevada. So he's a long way away from Florida where this house is. And you can hear them on the phone and they're screaming, we won, we won. They get pyro. Matt Pompizelli from Henderson, Nevada got pyro on a WWE pay-per-view. That's a dream right there. So they win the house, and thankfully the house promotion is over. I never really looked up to see what happened to this house. I think there's been a story done on it or two. So I know there's information out there. I'm just not quite sure what it is, but I believe they sold the house unless the whole family actually moved to Florida. I don't think they did, but I would assume they probably just sold it and hopefully got some money for it. But I don't know. I don't really know the history of that house and what the state of it is today. But the house has been given away, and then we would be spared ridiculousness for a few years, well over a decade, until Vince decided to start giving money away on Raw for no apparent reason whatsoever, just out of desperation, I guess, to try something new. Anyway, glad those days are over as well. And now it's time for the main event. World Wrestling Federation champion Diesel defending against Psycho Sid. Like I said, the first time I remember seeing Sid wrestle on TV since 1992. So this was an interesting match to see take place. And it wasn't a very good one. These two guys didn't really mesh well. Both did well when they were working with smaller guys. Diesel had really good matches with guys like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. Those were all memorable. You know, Sid, same thing. And that's usually the case with big guys. You know, most recently we just saw Omos have a pretty decent one with Seth Rollins. Most of Brock Lesnar's matches with smaller guys are way better. He's had classics with AJ, with Seth, with Daniel Bryan in WWE. So that tends to be the case with big guys anyway. But with these two, I felt like it was, going to be hard after a really good Bret Hart match earlier on with Hakushi, a couple of Bret Hart matches, by the way, for these guys to follow that, especially when it's just going to be a lot of clubbing blows and whatnot. And that's kind of what it was. It was, I guess, maybe a 10-minute match, and Sid finally is able to hit a power bomb on Diesel. Diesel goes down, and I believe in this bump is where Diesel hurts his elbow and needs some time off, and I think they put him in a tag at the King of the Ring even, just to give him a little bit more of a breather. So he hurt his elbow on that move, and he goes down. Or maybe he didn't really hurt it there. Maybe that was just the storyline reason for him to get the procedure done. I don't recall which is true. But he goes down. Sid takes forever. He goes through his whole last rights deal. I mean, this is a WWF championship match. He has just hit his finisher on the champion. And instead of going through for the cover, he's going through this ridiculous routine. What is it that he said on Nitro to this very man laying on the ground a few years later? I have half the brain you do. Yeah, I think you do, Sid. Holy shit, man. He went through all this nonsense, takes forever, finally decides to cover Diesel, and of course, Diesel kicks out. He then makes his comeback. He's got Sid on the ropes, power bomb to Sid. Diesel's about to win until Tatanka jumps in the ring and interferes, causing the disqualification. And as the two heels beat up Diesel, Bam Bam Bigelow runs in to make the save, and this would be the setup for the King of the Ring tag team match we would see the next month. So it would be Bam Bam and Diesel taking on Sid and Tatanka. And it's weird why they would even bring Bam Bam into this. I know Shawn at the time was on the shelf, and maybe they wanted Shawn in King of the Ring, but Shawn wasn't going to win the King of the Ring. Why didn't Shawn win King of the Ring? He should have. He should have. And the fact that he didn't is really weird. And if he wasn't going to win, why wasn't it Diesel and Shawn against Sid and Tatanka? You know what I mean? Bam Bam almost, made no sense in there. So Bam Bam makes the save. That would set up the King of the Ring tag team match. And then the month after that, in July, the show that we're going to watch tonight would be the Lumberjack match between Sid and Diesel, which was way better than this and a lot more fun because he had a lot of personalities out there. Lumberjack matches weren't all that common in 1995, and seeing the Clique all out there together in one place was also kind of cool to see at the time. So it would continue between these two, but here it was kind of a letdown for your first ever in your house to have a match end with a disqualification. And unfortunately, there was really nothing there to put in its place. You couldn't put Bret and Lawler in its place because Lawler beat Bret. So having a DQ, I don't know. But then again, 1995, you could get away with a lot more than you can today. And in terms of 1995 and where the product was at that time, I don't consider this pay-per-view to be very great. If I had to grade it out of 10, I'd probably give it a 5, to be honest. 5.5 out of 10. Is about the best I can give it. Not the greatest, but some of the in-your-houses that would follow this would get a lot better, and especially that one in December with that great bloody Bret and Bulldog massacre was one of my favorites ever. So In Your House, despite the rocky start, still holds a special place in my heart, and it was a blast reliving this night with you guys. So thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Mother's Day, and don't forget to check us out tonight as we watch together WWE In Your House #2. Y'all have a good rest of your day. Peace.